In this question, we want to focus on the effects of transfer payments. So for this, before we look into that, there's something that we need to recall here. Before we move on to the question, that recall that G does not recall that G does not include transfer payments, right? We don't have transfer payments in G because they don't correspond to the to because you don't get any good or service in return. Does not include transfer payments, right? So it's important to know in a goods market model where does transfer payments come in. So they don't come in G, right? Does not include transfer payments the government pays, right? Transfer payments are included in T because T is defined as taxes nearly transfers, right? So transfer payments are included in T, right? Are included in T. So it's important to know where transfer payments come in order to see the impact on demand, where T is taxes paid minus. So this is something that we do need to keep in mind. When transfer payments change, they're not going to affect demand through G, they're going to affect demand through T. Minus transfer payments received. Now that we have this out of the way, we can actually move on to the question. Right, so the first part says that the transfer payments are not financed by tax increases. The government borrows to pay money for transfer payments, right? So like let's look at the first part, right? So let's assume that we have an initial equilibrium which is at point A, right? So we'll draw the figure. Let me just draw the figure here then. So we have this initial. Let me just So where do we draw our figure? Okay, let's just draw the figure here and I'll just change that just a second. Initial equilibrium here, right? And then you have like your 45-degree line and then you have your demand schedule, right? So we have this, right? So let's just change this. Let's take it there, right? So we know, okay, this is on the horizontal, on the vertical axis, we have our demand for goods. On the vertical axis, we have Y. Right, and this we know is our 45-degree line, and this is Z is equal to C plus I. So if I write this as, okay, let me just write this as C. We know C is a function of Y minus T disposable income. So this is not C times Y minus T, this is C is a function of Y plus I plus T. And this is point A, our initial equilibrium. Equilibrium output is Y star. So like we said, in part A, initial equilibrium is going to be A, right? So now what happens is now transfer payments increase, right? So transfer payments increase. As a result of this, what's going to happen is T, which is taxes paid minus transfer payments received, is going to go down. Minus transfer payments received is going to go down, right? So it's going to go. So this increases, this is going to go down, right? So as a result of this, we know what's going to happen is your disposable income is going to increase, right? Because why? Because we know disposable income is just YD is equal to Y minus T. So when T goes down, your disposable income increases. Right, so disposable income is going to increase. As a result of this, we know consumption is going to increase. Why? Because it's a function of, because we know, right, over here, this is changing. So because C is equal to C naught plus C1 YD, right? So when YD goes up, C goes up, right? Consumption is a function of disposable income, right? So C is going to increase. When C is going to increase, that is going to cause Z to increase. Why? Because Z, we know consumption is one of the components of demand, C plus I plus G, right? So when this goes up as well, right? So Z increases, right? So the demand schedule shift upwards. So overall what happens is the demand schedule will shift upwards, right? Demand schedule shifts upwards, right? It's going to shift upwards and it's going to be a parallel shift. Right, so the demand schedule, let me just make the new demand schedule here. So it's going to shift upwards, right? So this is going to be Z is equal to C prime by minus T prime, right? So it's going to be something like this, okay, or let's not just move the C because C is a function of Y minus T prime now. So plus I plus G, right? So the demand schedule has shifted up. So initial equilibrium was A. The new equilibrium, if I just write it over here, so the new equilibrium is going to be A prime where Y increases, right? So the new equilibrium is at the intersection of the new demand schedule and the 45-degree line, and this is Y star prime, and you can see an increase in equilibrium output, right? So if you have transfer payments that are not financed by a tax increase, so we know that's going to cause your T, which is defined as taxes net of transfers, to go down. So disposable income goes up, consumption goes up, demand increases. And as the demand schedule shifts upwards in our goods market model, what's going to happen is equilibrium output is going to increase. And let's look at the effect of what if these transfer payments are financed with an equivalent increase in taxes, right? So let's look at part B for this. Let's just clear all of this up, right? So let's look at the second part. So now the second part is, now we know, okay, how did we define T? Remember, T is defined as taxes paid, right? So it's taxes paid minus transfer payments received. Minus transfer payments received. So what is happening is, so you're increasing transfer payments, right? So this goes up. But at the same time, the government pays for the increase in transfer payments is an equivalent increase in taxes, right? So this goes up as well, right? So both of them are going up and you're changing both by same amount. So you're changing both by same amount, right? So if you increase transfer payments, say by $20, right? So at the same time, your taxes paid are also increasing by $20. Overall, this becomes plus 20 minus 20, this becomes 0. So there's no effect, right? So the idea is this, the increase in taxes cancels out, so it cancels out increase in transfers, right? It is going to cancel out the increase in transfers. So overall, no change in T. Overall, there's no change in T because you're increasing both by the same amount. Increase in transfer payments is causing T to go down. But then you're increasing taxes by the same amount, so T remains unchanged, right? So overall, no change in T. Thus, no change in equilibrium, right? The entire, we don't have that chain anymore, right? There's no change in, we don't have that chain anymore. Okay, when T changes, disposable income changes, consumption changes, demand changes. So the conclusion here is, conclusion. The impact of transfer payments on equilibrium output. So the effect, the impact of transfer payments on equilibrium output depends on, so it depends, right? It depends on, are they funded through borrowing, like it was in part A? Are they funded through borrowing? Are they funded through borrowing, as in part A, in which case they will increase equilibrium output if you increase transfer payments funded through borrowing. So in part A, or through an equivalent increase in taxes, or through an equivalent increase in taxes, as in part B, in which case we did not see any effect on equilibrium output. So it depends.